In this video, I'm going to be going over what I believe to be Joe Biden's 5 best accomplishments as president so far. And the first of these that I will be talking about is Joe Biden making the decision to re-enter the United States into the Paris Climate Accord. Climate change is arguably one of the most important, if not the most important challenge and crisis that the United States and the world will face over the next 5 to 10 years. The Trump administration made a terrible decision in withdrawing from the Paris Climate Accord, and the Biden administration has made a good decision re-entering the Paris Climate Accord. It will not just help to reduce and mitigate the effects of climate change, which are already disastrous. According to the World Health Organization, 150,000 people die every year due to the effects of climate change, and it is projected to increase rapidly over the next decade unless strict and drastic action is taken by the major economies and carbon emitters of the world, like the US, China, and India. The Trump administration withdrew from the Paris Climate Accord because Trump believed that A, climate change was a Chinese hoax, and that B, it would be bad for the economy. The Paris Climate Accord would be bad for the US economy. However, this is false. According to the International Energy Agency, the Paris Climate Accord will result in massive economic growth over the next 30 years. In fact, the GDP of the whole world will increase by $19 trillion by 2050 just due to the Paris Climate Accord, if every country has signed it. It would be irresponsible of the United States government to not take advantage of this. When Joe Biden re-entered the Paris Climate Accord, he was not just committing the US to a global effort to help mitigate the negative effects of climate change. He was making sure that the United States did not fall behind and making sure that the United States would be able to take part in this massive economic growth resulting from the Paris Climate Accord. And that is why one of Joe Biden's best accomplishments as president so far has been rejoining the Paris Climate Accord. It is not nearly enough that will be needed to stop and mitigate the effects of climate change, but it is a step in the right direction that will have a great economic impact and a great impact on stopping the effects of climate change. And Joe Biden has even more ambitious plans to help mitigate the effects of climate change that are being proposed right now. The next point that I'm going to talk about is Joe Biden's task force. Joe Biden established a task force to help reunite kids and parents that were separated at the border under the Trump administration. Now, this is not as easy a task as some people might think. Some people might think it's just the issue of policy and ideology and whether the president thinks should they be separated or should they be united. And once we have someone like Joe Biden in the White House who thinks that parents and children at the border should be kept together and not separated, then he can just be like, okay, I reverse that policy, stop separating them, bring them back together. No, because the Trump administration, which separated 5,500 families at the border, had no intention of reuniting them. So they didn't keep track of the contact information of the parents or which children went to which parents. It was very difficult. They had to hire lawyers, activists, experts who worked to find any type of leads possible. Many of the parents were deported back to the other countries, and the only information about them that they had is that this kid's parents was deported to Guatemala or El Salvador or Nicaragua or Honduras, but they don't have any other information about that. It was a very big task to reunite these children and their parents. Now, the Trump administration separated 5,500 families between 2016 and 2020. Well, technically 2017 to 2021 because Trump was inaugurated January 2021. But anyway, he separated 5,500 families. The Biden administration's task force has reunited 4,500 of those families, meaning that 80% of the families have been reunited successfully by the Biden administration's immigration task force. And this is a very good accomplishment. However, there are still 1,000 families that need to be reunited, and the Biden administration is continuing its work on reuniting those families. But 80% of the families being reunited is a very good accomplishment. The next point that I'm going to be talking about has to do with one of Joe Biden's economic policies that was part of his $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan. And that was the Enhanced Child Tax Credit. Now, normally when you file your taxes, if you have children under the age of 17, you can reduce your taxes by $2,000 per child using child tax credits, and that will still be in place. But for the vast majority of the American people, many American taxpayers will get an enhanced child tax credit this year because of the economic circumstances due to COVID-19 and the pandemic. So 90% of the American taxpayers qualify for this, 90% of people. And these 90% will be able to get $3,000 child tax credits instead of $2,000. So $3,000 child tax credits for children ages 6 to 17 for 90% of people. People above that income line will still be able to get the normal $2,000 one. So $3,000 child tax credits for children ages 6 to 17 for 90% of American taxpayers, and $3,600 for children under the age of 6. And you might think that, and a lot of people are underestimating the impact that this may have. When you first look at it, it doesn't sound that impressive. It sounds good, but it doesn't sound like it would make huge progress in eliminating child poverty or whatever. But in reality, a study by Columbia University found that it would cut child poverty by half. To put that in perspective, due to this policy, 5 million children will be lifted out of poverty in the United States this year due to the enhanced child tax credit. That is the greatest reduction in child poverty in the nation's history. Never before has a single policy been able to reduce child poverty by half. That has never happened, even with FDR's New Deal economic programs, even with Lyndon Johnson's Great Society economic programs. No previous administration in U.S. history has ever done something that has resulted in such a sharp decrease in child poverty. So this is a very big deal. I would also like to talk about how economically equitable this enhanced child tax credit is. To put this in perspective, the Trump administration passed a tax cut in 2017, but 83% of the benefits of the tax cut went to the top 1% of taxpayers. 83% of the benefits went to the top 1%. And not only is this kind of unfair because they're the ones who need it the least, while the ones who need it the most didn't really get a large portion of the benefits, or a significant portion of the benefits. But it's also bad for the economy. Numerous studies have shown that if you direct stimulus toward the very wealthy, $1 adds 39 cents to the economy. That's not net 39 cents. That means the $1 that you cut in taxes or give a $1 stimulus check or whatever, for every $1 that they give to the very wealthy in an economy, that adds 39 cents to the GDP. So you are losing money and it is economically inefficient. But for the middle class and the poor in an economy, if you give $1 to them, it'll add $1.21 to the economy. So that's 21% net for every dollar. So that is a much more economically efficient and effective way to grow an economy. And it will also be very effective in tackling economic inequality. Now I would like to move on to a similar economic policy, and that is one that many people know about and was the main factor in Joe Biden's $1.9 trillion stimulus bill, the American Rescue Plan. And that is the $1,400 stimulus checks. Now these $1,400 stimulus checks, the idea behind these stimulus checks is not some kind of a handout just to get people's votes, as some people would think. In reality, this is very efficient for the economy. As I have said before, it's much more economically efficient and effective to give and direct stimulus checks, direct stimulus, not like through any other ways that goes through multiple layers, through corporations or other ways. No, the best way is direct checks or direct tax cuts or direct tax benefits, anything that is direct to the middle class and poor of an economy is economically efficient and effective for growing an economy. And the idea behind this is Keynesian economics. Now, Keynesian economics is the idea that in a recession or even in a normal time, the best way to grow the economy and help the economy is for the government to generate economic activity by creating jobs or otherwise putting money into the pockets of ordinary people in the economy. And this is the policy that helped greatly mitigate the effects of the Great Depression and essentially ended the Great Depression because when World War II started, the United States invested so much into logistics and military production that it basically cured the Great Depression. It is also the same ideology that got the United States out of the 2008 and 2009 Great Recession, Keynesian economics. Meanwhile, another theory of economics, is something called laissez-faire economics, which is don't spend and cut taxes, deregulation, which should be used in an economic crisis or in normal times, and that was actually used in the Reagan administration, which sometimes can cause short-term economic benefits, but in the long term, Reagan's economic policies actually ended up causing a recession that only occurred when his successor took office. So anyway, these stimulus checks represent a fundamental shift in the way the economy will be structured. The Biden administration is moving to a more equitable way of reviving and growing the economy, and this is important. Now I'm going to be going on to my final point, which is what I believe the Biden administration's best accomplishment in his presidency so far, and that is his response to COVID-19. On January 20th, the United States recorded 142,000 new cases of COVID-19. On June 3rd, the United States recorded 20,000 new cases of COVID-19. That is an 86% drop in cases. When the Biden administration took office and began its work on its first day, it was 142,000 cases. Then, by June 3rd, it dropped by 86%. So that is very good, because when you think about it, that means that the vast majority of the progress for ending the pandemic is done. Now we only need to get that last 14%, which will be harder than the first 14% or the second 14%, but it's an 86% drop in cases. The drop in cases has been 86% done. We are very close to ending the pandemic in the United States. And the Biden administration's secret weapon behind this massive revival is good vaccine distribution. On January 20th, the Biden administration's first day in government, the United States administered 890,000 vaccine doses. On March 20th, just 2 months later, the United States administered 2.25 million vaccine doses, which is an increase of 153%, more than doubling. Doubling is a 100% increase. This is an increase of 153% in 2 months. Just 1 month later, April 20th, the United States was administering 3 million doses a day on April 20th. That is an increase of 237% since January 20th. And now the discussion in January and February and March was, can the United States even get enough doses for it to be mathematically possible to reach herd immunity? Do we even have enough doses to administer? Can we even administer them? Do we have enough locations around the country that are equipped with the vaccines? Do we have the logistics ready? Can we even do this? But now that's all fixed. The Biden administration is doing as good as it possibly can in terms of its side of what to do. The only factor that's left in ending the pandemic is whether or not people want to get the vaccine. No matter what state you live in, whether you live in Alaska or Hawaii, which is not part of the contiguous 48 states, you can still get the COVID-19 vaccine if you want, if you're eligible for it. Everybody who is eligible for it can get it. That was not the situation in January and February. And logistics, infrastructure, and distribution, and supply, those were the main concerns. Now they've all been fixed to the best of their ability. It could not be better. Those areas could not be better in terms of vaccine distribution, logistics, infrastructure, etc. The only thing left is whether or not people choose to get the vaccine. And if more people start to choose that option, we will be very close to ending this pandemic. And in short, that is what, in my opinion, the 5 best accomplishments of the Biden administration so far: rejoining the Paris Climate Accord, reuniting 4,500 families that were separated near the border by the Trump administration, the enhanced child tax credit, which will cut child poverty in half, the stimulus checks, which signal a fundamental shift in the way the economy is structured. And it's also been proven by a study by the University of Michigan that the stimulus checks in the $1.9 trillion stimulus bill actually reduced food insecurity by 40%, and it reduced anxiety and depression by 20%. And finally, the response to the COVID-19 pandemic, which has resulted in an 86% drop in cases and a 237% increase in doses between January 20th and April 20th. And these are, in my opinion, Joe Biden's 5 biggest accomplishments as president. Thank you.